have here Nico Po, one of the most dynamic property developers in Indonesia, and has many projects which has significant impact from the two topics that we're talking about today. One is PropTech, the other one is senior care. And we're going to have an interesting chat about how it's all in the mix and the play and it's all integrated. So I'd like to start with James, and who has been with us for the last few days, and he's one of the world's leading property futurists. And we have Col Sridharan, who is known as one of the pioneers of senior care in India, which has today been acknowledged as leading the forefront of providing senior care to senior citizens. I think the discussion today is going to be a little bit more about how these two sectors impact property developers and how it changes the way property developers are preparing their projects in order to meet these needs. So maybe I'd like to start with you, Nico, first. You have been in the property sector for quite many years. You have seen the transition of how properties used to be developed 15, 20 years ago, because that's the property that's ready today to occupy, because assuming that lead time it takes for a property to be in the market. And how you've been starting to think today about the future property projects that you're putting out. So what has been the shift in thinking, in your opinion?
Pollux Properties specialize in developing integrated developments. And our main focus is basically to create a better standard of living, to create a quality of life for the people. We see a lot of change in the past few years in the lifestyle of the people due to some of the new introductions of new technologies. And also we see some new ways on how people are looking at buying properties. We see a lot of change on the way we design our real estate projects. I think today's requirements is basically we are trying to develop an integrated projects which can suit the requirements of our biggest market, which is the millennials, as well as the seniors which are going to stay together. Because it is in Indonesia's culture where parents and children usually tends to stay close together in one integrated developments. And we also see how the millennials requires a bigger communal living, in the way that they can interact better and they can adapt to the lifestyle which are used to have, with one vision, which is to create quality of life for the millennials as well as the seniors and people, as overall. Yeah.
Sure. So James, to jump into the conversation, what I'd like to ask you is that you've been talking in many parts of the world.
Yeah.
And this is specific to the rest of the region, not specifically about Indonesia. Have you seen this match where PropTech companies and developers actually understand each other? Because
no, not yet.
Yeah.
They are getting there. They are getting there. It's a perennial problem, which is if you're matching very established, process-driven companies with procurement challenges, and you match that with young, ambitious, dynamic, agile mindsets, the two do have struggles coming together. Maybe, we're seeing now maybe a little bit more of an acceptance around this mentality shift. So there are very agile minds now at the larger corporations, and they're starting to understand that actually we need to do some work together. But fundamentally, the processes which both types of companies adhere to are so fundamentally different that there are challenges at that level now. It's not the mentality, it's at the process-driven level.
So having been in Indonesia for the last couple of days, do you see that there's anything different in this market? How do you benchmark it?
Very different.
What's
Well,
your view on it?
But to give you an idea, Sachin, I genuinely came here with one speech, and I sat down with the likes of Nico and yourself and the Colonel, and I had to completely change what I was going to talk about because I realised that the Indonesian mentality is one of we need change. It's not we want change, but we need change. And the language coming out of the very, very senior and very respected personnel within the organisations at the very top level and the ministerial level are such that you have what is the hardest bit to change, which is this mentality shift. The discussion around different types of construction, the discussion around different sorts of technologies that we've already talked about are there. It's very obvious to me that the leaders of these organisations and the leaders of the industry and the nation builders, as you call them, are already so far ahead of some of the mainland European connections that I'm working with and even the US operations. They haven't got this mentality shift yet. But the interesting thing for me is that they maybe haven't got the mentality shift, but they have the capability within the infrastructure, perhaps, which maybe you don't have. So there's an interesting dynamic here, which is they are mentality weak, infrastructure strong, whereas perhaps you are mentality strong, but infrastructure weak. And it's a fascinating dynamic.
James, I want to just ask you one thing here. Let us say that they're starting a new wonderful projects. They're going to be, it's on the drawing board, it's going to take off now. At this point of time, if a prop tech company gets involved with them and tells them how to plan for the future, what else can be done, what can be dovetailed, right from the beginning itself, would you think that that will make them learn also and implement it?
Yeah, fundamentally. I mean, if you think of the construction sector, it's very traditionally margin tight. 1 or 2% margins on builds. It's very, very small, very, very difficult to make good profitability. And so one of the reasons why some of these larger construction companies and others, retail sector, logistical sector, are doing this is because they recognize that in the short term, what PropTech will do is it will drive efficiencies within an organization. And there are so many simple solutions, because one thing that we do is we do have very good mobile internet connectivity and the world over, to be honest. And so driving efficiencies on the building site to have platform softwares where you can have the planner, the architect, the builder, the construction worker, the organization board, all working together on one piece of software which they can all adhere to and see all of the architectural models and make live changes in real time, which the planner and the architect can then agree on live. That sort of thing will just drive efficiencies within the business. So I fundamentally agree with that, Colonel. Yeah, but do you mind if I just...
Also to think that this is as a part of your project management team or project, I would call it a project creation team. I think you have to include them right from the go, so that you can take the expertise and then carry on.
I think what James has shared is very true in a way that we are ready for change. We are transport infrastructure weak, but mentally we are always drive for change. We would like to create a better standard of living. We would like to prepare for the future. We understand that the requirements of the next 10 years would be very different from today's. So we would like to plan as early as possible to accommodate to the requirements of the future. Yeah.
So James, you had a chance to have a look at some of the Pollux projects, especially at the conference. What's your view of compared to so many other projects that you've been looking at around the world?
One of the things I really like about it, and it doesn't just stop at Pollux, if I may, but it's this idea that in Jakarta, for example, you just mentioned there, Nico, about the transport infrastructure being weak. And it is, because anything that you're going to try to do to it is going to cause massive problems Jakarta-wide, in terms of if you try and build a tunnel here, it causes a massive problem elsewhere. When you're building new projects, which are multiple buildings, mixed-use buildings, Technopolis as a classic example, you can build from the infrastructure up. So you can really think very carefully about not just what we need today, but what we need over the next 10 to 20 years. So if you get the road networks in correctly, if you get in the connectivity, which I still think is a fundamental point of any construction project going forward. You have to be so connected and have such powerful connectivity that you can future-proof anything that development's going to go through. And so the developments like I've seen with Pollux are absolutely heading in the right direction, without a shadow of doubt, because one or two things. Number one, it seems the infrastructure is very strong. Number two, the connectivity is very strong. Number three, and I think most importantly, is it's very concentrated on vertical living, which is a trend I think we'll see to continue. But what I think is a development of that is it's not just about the singular vertical, because my concern about that is that we will start to have building silos where people will only live within that community in that vertical nature. And I think what we've got to consider is that if we're going to build vertically, we've almost got to build a second tier of horizontal living as well, which is up at that middle tier level, because I think we're so obsessed with what's going on the ground, we're now so obsessed with just going up. What we've now got to consider is that we've got this ability to build in a second horizontal layer of living, which is only going to add massive benefits to us as a society, because we'll have this ability to have this social cohesion at another level. So that's the development for me.
Right, and that is exactly actually what we have tried to do. I think what James has shared about connectivity is very important. We are trying to implement connectivity in, number one is the transport infrastructure. For one good example in Technopolis, we identified government initiative, big initiatives in creating the transport infrastructure, which is the high-speed train Jakarta-Bandung, elevated toll roads, we have the airports, and we have new toll roads, new exit toll roads coming into the Technopolis side. And I think this is a very important catalyst, transport infrastructure to provide a solution for the future CBDs or future living of the people. And I like the idea that we cannot only focus on the ground level. We should also be focusing on the next level of integration, which is creating communal spaces on the mid-level, on the 20th floor, on the 30th floor, to create a better quality of life. Because today's technology allows better connectivity, which means today's millennials or even seniors, today's people, they would like to be better connected with other people. They would like a place where they can interact, where they can socialize, and I think this is a real important criteria in today's developments. And we also would like to see what is the trends, the requirements of the seniors, as well as the requirements of the evolution of technology, which would be able to enhance the quality of life of the people. Because our main priority is, at the end of the day, is quality of life.
Quality of life and human happiness.
Would you mind if I pick up on that point? Because I think, Nico, you raise a very interesting perspective based on your question you had earlier, Sachin, about my observations of developments worldwide. And one of the big trends that we are seeing globally is this big move towards more co-working and co-living. Because again, it comes down to this whole affordability issue. We've had co-living for many, many years in the senior living that the Colonel has talked so much about already, where the seniors want this community feel. Not in every case, but generically speaking, they want community living. And so what they sacrifice is they sacrifice for a smaller unit size for far larger communal living, which means that this social cohesion becomes an important part. And the tragic thing for me about what I would see as the most connected generation we've ever had, the millennials, we are connected to everybody. Friendships have become far more transient with social media. Tragically, they're also the loneliest generation that we have. And so one of the trends that we're seeing globally is that in their living requirements, they are actually demanding of large communal areas where they can actually interact physically with others, because their whole lives are virtual, which is a bit tragic. So for me, this aspect of communal living that Nico has said is going to be more and more important, and expect, I think, to see far smaller unit sizes on a private level with a far larger communal level.
Yeah, and my views on technology is that technology breaks down the barriers between the seniors and the millennials.
Yes.
technology create a much better platform for the seniors and the millennials to be able to connect together. That is my views. And I think for property developers, for us, it's very important on how to satisfy both segments of the market and how to create a very holistic living. Because in Indonesia culture, the children would still like to stay with the parents, and it is always the children's concerns to ensure that the well-being of the parents are taken care of. So in all of our developments, we ensure that we satisfy the requirements of the senior living, and we also attached a medical care within our integrated super blocks, so that when the children are working, the parents can be taken care of by these medical services.
So I think that has been part of your journey as well, that when you started with the standalone senior care facilities to now becoming much more integrated with regular townships and developments. So that kind of will on both sides, actually the developers play a big role in allowing facilities to be there available for catering to. So I think the mentality of the developers is very important. I feel that, in the way that we've seen some of the projects being developed in Indonesia, they are kind of getting ready for the way people want to live, and they're looking at more the aspects of being happy. Right. And if Indonesian people will see happiness as a key aspiration, all of these things come into the mix. Now it becomes therefore a massive collaboration of different skill sets coming in to create these quality of services, because there is value in what Colonel is doing is in making sure that that segment is being taken care of. It may not be possible for one entity to look after the interest of all. So the collaboration becomes very powerful because they are the specialists. They will ensure that that angle of care is being provided, and somebody else might be looking at the care for the children, for example, and making sure the children's education, their play areas are being taken care of. So I think as a developer, are you tapping into the expertise, let's say in your own projects, are you finding the right kind of people to advise in creating this kind of facilities, or do you have that already within the developer, your organization?
Yeah, in all of our projects, we ensure that we satisfy all segments of our customers, right from children up till the seniors.
Yeah.
For example, one of our projects, we developed a dual key units, meaning that the children and the families can still stay in one unit, but they have a separate connecting unit, probably a studio unit, which is for the parents, where we satisfy bigger doors, toilets which open outwards. These are specific requirements which are needed by the elderly, and we also have a panic button. So in the event that they require an emergency attention, they can quickly push the panic buttons. And in our developments, we also integrate nursery schools as well to accommodate to the children's. So we try to create a holistic developments which allows all segments of the market to
Coexist.
live together harmoniously with one main vision: to create a quality of life for everyone. Not just for the millennials, not just for the seniors.
This one small difference
Yes.
that we have been implementing in India, the similar township that you're talking about, this dual housing that you're saying, one senior-friendly small unit attached to the main unit, where the children also stay. Daytime they can all mingle around, and whenever they want their own time and space, they go to the respective spaces.
Right.
That is what is the concept. Now, what we have done is slightly different. See, many of the seniors are single. They don't have the
Spouse.
spouse. Many of the seniors don't have children. So we have to cater for everybody. And we also cater for this person with disability, some portion of them. But they stay with their parents. Now, if you look at this holistically, I would say that this mixing up with the seniors, this is a good idea, because take care of the local requirement. But for some, like the way I told you, may not suit them. And also, I do feel that today's children, the millennials or today's children, right, millennials, even my own daughter who's 40 years, they all need their space. So what we have done is that we have got a separate block for the seniors with all the facilities, amenities, care, everything being given here. Assisted care, whatever care you want is all in this building.
Right.
Then another block, let us say all the children, everybody else stays. It's open to everyone. Now they can always come and meet each other. They know that the children can also go away on a holiday vacation. They can leave the small children with their grandparents here. And if they go away on work, they don't have any children, they know the parents will be taken care of.
Right.
And in case of any emergency, and also like the way you're having nursery schools, these parents can themselves become the teachers. They'll be very good teachers. You teach them. So you make the family mix, but yet keep them slightly away.
Give space.
Why I'm saying that is the millennial generation is going to be more detached. These cities are going to be lonely. So they would still prefer the space, but they want to know at what time and what time, in the daytime or in the evening, they want to mix with everybody else. So you have very correctly created that area, which can be for everyone. But for them, make them slightly one block away and then they can stay there. Because one thing I've seen in China is they have this daycare centers. Amazing concept there. And actually I got photographs singing and dancing with them. They all come in the locality, senior citizens, children have gone to work, and they sing songs, they're shown old movies, and then there are so many massage equipment for your legs, there's that and all that. And they have lunch there, they sleep also there only like this. And evening they have tea and then they go back, the children take them away or the van takes them and drops them, or somebody is driving a scooter. In fact, I got a photograph of a couple making me sit down in between and taking me in a scooter.
Yeah.
It's amazing, and they say that our time is spent beautifully in this care center.
Right.
A similar thing if you have a care center as a daytime, you all come, enjoy, go away to the respective places.
So it's like a club.
Yeah.
It's like a
So
club.
in fact,
Social
what
club.
we felt is that culturally, sometimes it's a little bit difficult for the parents to stay separately from the children. So what we have done is that we created communal facilities, like recreational facilities, so that they can do their Zumba, in the day. They can create some all-day programs for the seniors. But yet, when they come back, they can still come back to the families.
What
They
about the
can,
food and all that? They eat at home.
they'll eat at home. They'll stay at home, because I think Indonesia's culture still, at the end, in the evening, they still would like to have dinner with their families, and then they take a rest, and then in the morning, they have breakfast together, and then everyone goes separate ways. The parents are working, the kids go to school, and then the seniors can go to the community centers downstairs, which satisfy all the programs to give them a much better ways to spend the day. Yeah.
If I may, this is I think the biggest difference between perhaps what's going on here and what's going on elsewhere, because as developers in the UK, this is not what they do, because the family dynamic is broken. The UK is not like that, sadly.
India is happening.
It's a shame, and I think there is. I'm not saying it will happen, but I think there is a threat that as developers, we have to consider what happens if this generation, and I'm not talking about the millennials, I'm talking about the over 35 generation, this sort of one between generation X or whatever it is. What if we don't want to look after our family because we are too busy, because we are always working? What then happens? And I think this is what we've seen in the UK, where now senior living is a separate entity at the minute, and it's a shame, because I think it should be more like this. Certainly, my own aspirations is that when my parents and my wife's parents fall ill, then we will look after them, and they could be part of. We call them a granny flat on the side. But I think there is a consideration that you have to have as a developer to say, well, is this going to be the same in 10 years' time? Is there still going to be this demand? And I genuinely hope there will be. But the interesting thing for me here is that we're talking about this combination of property, technology, and fundamentally sociology,
And culture as
and
well.
it's a
Yeah.
wonderful mix. Very aspirational, I feel.
For one example in Singapore, where it's a very modern society, everybody is so busy, but very important is there's government initiatives which encouraged children to stay with their elderly parents. You know, it's a government initiative that it is culturally not right to actually just put aside your elderly parents and stay independently, and have a segregated lifestyle. And I think this is a very good initiative, and the government initiatives have created a solutions with these community centers to give a lot of ease for the children which are working, but in a way, how can their parents be taken care of? So there are a lot of these community centers in Singapore which cater to these needs. So once we look at it, I think it fits the Indonesia's culture and the way we live. Because the more successful we are, I think we tend to take care our parents better. It is only if some of the families which they do not do well and they do not have enough resources to take care of the parents, they don't have enough time, then the senior parents would tend to be more neglected. Yeah.
So it's interesting that how you bring the context of sociology and in the way culture is here. Do you think this would also apply to, let's say, Indonesians living overseas? And there are a lot of Indonesians living in other parts of the world. Do you see that there is a play for property developers in those countries catering to Indonesians in the same way that you're doing here? Or do you see that they are influenced heavily by the social norms of that particular country?
And what happens with their parents?
Do the diaspora think the same way? Yeah, what I mean is the parents can then have an opportunity to move to those countries.
I don't think parents will. See, this is a very, very.
Yeah.
You should never expect such things. Parents like the place. They're like cats. They like the place where they've been born, brought up, and they were their friends, relatives, everybody. If they move with the child, they move for once. Then after they get fed up, because what is the lifestyle outside? Yeah, they got friends, they got somebody to coming, going, and all that. They don't have any such things there. So parents, I don't think, will move with the children. The children have to see, in such a case, when I'm not with my parents, like the way he has made arrangements for the children and the parents to stay together, I said, what will happen to those parents? That is what we need to look at. They may need some sort of a community living, like the way you suggested,
Right.
so that they are not, they don't feel miserable. Their needs are taken care of. Their emergencies are addressed. Their various services requirements are taken care of. So there is a segment of population which will definitely do that.
Right, there's a demand and there's a segment which requires the service of independent senior living to
With
make them have
assisted care.
with assisted care to give them a better quality of life.
Assisted care is very important. You start your complete senior care segment in Indonesia by having only an assisted care unit, where people who have got a stroke or last stages of Parkinson, you move them inside,
Right.
and maybe the children also will come and they'll start seeing your place. They can buy some property there. The assisted care is missing. It's missing mostly in India also. It's just started coming up. It's very important. Once you give that assurance that the senior citizens will be taken care of with assisted care, automatically they'll also come and buy and settle on the same place.
I see.
Okay.
But my experience is that when I ask a lot of these seniors, their request is one: they would love to stay with their children, but they do not want to give trouble for the children. They love, this the first priority is to be able to stay with the children. But secondly, they also do not want the children to be inconvenienced.
Assisted
So,
care is the answer.
so as the developers, we are trying to create the solutions so that in a way they can have a good lifestyle living together, But we try to solve these inconveniences like assisted living, medical care, and nursing.
So, Nico, the question I want to ask you here is that, if as a developer, how far do you prepare for these smaller details? Or do you look at partnerships in order to develop that level of detail into how your programs run? Because creating the infrastructure is one thing, but to actually make it work once everybody's in there and then you have, how do you prepare for that?
As a property developer, we work with a lot of specialists. We partner with a lot of specialists to ensure that each aspect of these areas are well developed. For example, for hospitals, we work with a specialist operator. For hotel, we work with another operator. For senior living, we are discussing with Colonel on how to create good quality assisted living for the seniors in specialized segments. We are faced with a lot of problems in the property industry, but we are also looking at how prop tech can become the solutions to break these barriers. I think the only solution which can break these barriers is basically technology. And we are always very open on how technology can really help to improve the quality of life and the way it will change people live and the way it will change developers plans their products to match the demand of the people.
Okay. So you see Pollux as a developer today, but do you see Pollux also being a prop tech player in the future? Because it's quite seamless, really. One is an infrastructure creator, but the other one is an enabler.
Right.
How do you see Pollux into the future?
I think we see ourselves as a provider of lifestyle, a provider of quality of life through providing quality environments, quality homes to the people. I think we have to be very sensitive to the latest prop tech, which would allow quality of life to be improved, which would change the way people live, and we have to collaborate, we have to adopt, and we have to synergize, to be relevant in the next 10 years.
So Pollux is really evolving itself as an organization. It's no longer about being a developer. It's actually about providing quality of life.
That is our main vision. We, as a property developer, our main vision is to provide quality of life to the people through our developments.
Well, it's interesting to see this mentality. Yeah, sure.
One of the things that I used to say always was that don't tell the seniors what you want to give them. Ask them what they want and then give them. See, most of us assume that this is what the seniors need or a particular segment of people need.
Right.
I think that you have to ask them what they need, firstly. Of course, we have the experience and then we can always modify that. The next point which we had with Diana, and he was very correctly said, I said I must have some a millennial, in my research team to understand what it is.
Right.
He said best thing is to put that boy or girl in the board as an executive director.
Yes.
So that we get their ideas. It's a very good point. After all, it doesn't matter whatever you have, and then that boy or the girl is answerable to that. So I think we have to look at the needs and also look at the various facilities that are available today. You talked about the panic button. We tried the panic button, we thought it will not work over a period of time because if I fall in a place away from the panic button, how do I crawl to that? So we have got a watch like this. Now you got a GPRS. So that also is incorporated for dementia people. We set the boundaries. So the moment you cross the boundary, the alarm goes to the guard room.
I see.
And if you fall, you just have to press this. It sends out 10 messages, including to your son, daughter, wherever they are. SMS. And then it starts hunting numbers, the 10 numbers. Whoever picks up the phone, you just have to say, I'm in trouble. That's all. The system takes over. And this one you can wear, but it is not waterproof. But you can just hang it next to your shower. So that may the accident take place only in the shower. So there are points like this that we have incorporated. Like senior citizens forget to put out the lights. Very simple thing. Huh?
Right.
I've been fired by my wife so many times. Put out the light, you know. So toilet light, and we get up all through the night. So to do that, we have sensors now. There's so many things that are available in the market. Very cheap, very very cost effective, and you can use all those things, you know, and literally make their lives very simple. And you know they know that these things are. I don't let them put the latch in the toilet. There's no latch.
Right.
The toilet knob itself, you close it. But in case you fall inside, I can open from outside.
Yes, that's important.
Very important. So there are small things like the door width should open outwards. There's no tile drop. The wheelchair should be permitted to go inside. And today we got toilet system. We import from Denmark. And those toilets are absolutely senior friendly. We give it to every single apartment because we never know when they will need one. And with that, a third person need not come to lift you up and put you on the WC or clean you up. Nothing is required. You can do everything yourself on the wheelchair.
Right.
So you improve your self-esteem. So there's so many things are available like that. The building codes have been made. Like yesterday, somebody said, why we don't even have a footpath? I think
Sidewalk, yeah. No sidewalks. Marcus was saying
that in Singapore we have sidewalks, why we don't have? In our place, we don't have sidewalks, but we have widened the road. Sidewalk is a problem, especially with a wheelchair and things like that. It's a very difficult thing. So we said instead of having a road at 30 feet, make it 40 feet. At the side. And there's not much of traffic inside a senior facility because most of them don't own a car. So it's very,
Yeah, so it's very important to work with a specialist like Connell, who specialize in understanding the real need of the senior living to provide the right solutions to this segment of the market.
I'm really sorry, we've just added about 2 people to your executive board. We've added a senior and we've added a junior. Your executive dynamics are going to be very different now, I think.
I think that the main keyword is harmonious living. In our view, harmonious living is not a segregated living. Harmonious living is the ability to live with your parents, your children, some of my extended families, harmoniously. It do not provide inconveniences. So how can we provide that? We need a lot of the right solution and the specialist inputs on how to be able to create the right product.
So as a specialist input from James, you talked a lot about mentality and being one of the core definitions of what PropTech is, right? And having this conversation that we've been having for the last few minutes, is there something that you would like to say which would be like some advice or some directional, a direction to follow? What would you advise both a service provider and as well as a developer?
I think the advice is the same, and it does come back to this term mentality because, and just for a degree of context for perhaps viewers who are watching, the point here is that this evolution around real estate technology is not necessarily about the tech itself. It's about the consumers adopting the technology and having the mentality and expectations of change, which is, why can't I do it immediately? Why can't I change something now? Why do I have to phone somebody? Why do I have to receive it as a letter? Why can't I just see it online? Why can't I have an app? Why? It's the mentality shift. And my advice for anybody in this, as it always has been, to say, have a senior on your board, have a junior on your board, which means you've probably in your board meetings got somebody on a mobile phone and you've probably got someone asleep in the board meeting.
But it could be the other way around.
It could be the other way around. It could be the other way around. But aside from that, there is one more important aspect to all of this, which is we have to consider the consumer first. We have to understand our client. It doesn't matter if you're a service provider or a developer. An innate understanding as to the market you are trying to hit is the only way you're going to succeed in the next 10 or 20 years. And it sounds so silly and almost fluffy, but it's not wrong, and it wasn't wrong 20 years ago when you still said the same thing. And I think what we have this ability to do is to lose sight as a business that we're thinking about the development and how big can we make the development, and can we do this and can we do that. If you're forgetting about that consumer and what they want, you could really run the risk of your entire development, in your case, and the services that you're providing in the other.
I think that we also need this mobility of mind. Your mind should be mobile to accept change, accept new ideas.
That's very
My
important.
senior citizens, I've given them the software in their mobile phones for all services, all requirements, including the billing. So initially they were resisting to it. They said, why do you need it? Now they understand that, even a cup of coffee, what time it comes, how long when did they order, there's a quality issue that we can control. So these are the things that we have also taught them. We take classes and teach them practically. An 85-year-old lady ordering an app. For me, it's a great thing.
It's a great thing, and it's very progressive, Panama, I must say.
And you want somebody to come and do the garden work extra half an hour, you can book it.
But can I just say that, and this is the important point, because let's just assume if we take your entire development, 40% of people will want to do that. 60% of people will not. And it's an understanding of that, and then contextualizing, in your case, the service you provide, and sadly it means more work for us. But we have to remember, it comes down to the consumer. If they want a more advanced way of on-demand services on their app, we have to facilitate that now.
Yes.
If they don't, and they're more traditional in their outlook, we have to do that too.
They can't be a one shoe fits all. They can't be a one shoe fits all. You got to be able to
Traditionally,
customize.
we have thought that's the case, and what we have done is we've dictated the service we provide because we think it's the service they want.
They may not be. So you have to have dialogues.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So going back on what you advised, what are the ways today of understanding and learning the consumer? I would
The
say.
new way, I mean, there is an awful lot of work around having consumer groups. So when you are, let's say, take Nico's case, where you think, well, we really like this new area, we've bought some land, and you speak to an architect and you say, build me a development. You've got to go back from that and say, well, what development do we need to build? So even before the architect comes on board, you have to consider what sort of client would want to live there. Then you need to get an entire group of those people around and have consumer meetings and say, we've bought this piece of land, what should we do? What should we be building? What services do we need to provide? And then that formulates the plan that you then go and speak to your planners and your architects and say, this is what our consumer is wanting, there is your brief. So it doesn't come from the executive board thinking they know what is right. You've got to go right down to the very bottom level and ask the people who want, who you think will be buying your development, to suggest the ideas to you. So little tiny things like that.
How about big data? How about other sources of such information that helps you plan?
Yeah, big data will tell you, but again, without an innate understanding as to who the people are that's going to be in your development, for example,
Sure.
you can't then bring on the big data you can. I mean,
Sure.
big data is, to give it as an example in the retail sector, big data will tell you everything you need to know about a certain retail store, shopping mall that you could ever need. So if you've bought a piece of land and you think, I want to build a several 100,000 square foot mall, you find the analytics from another several 100,000 square foot mall, find out how people are moving within it, and that will help you plan. And arguably you could probably do the same within a residential unit, but that's still not about the service element that is being
Sure.
built within it.
You've been doing a lot of research into how do you go about doing research about your consumers?
I think James' idea of having a consumer good is a very interesting concept. You're trying to get a real perspective on what the customers want. I think that is basic, but a lot of developers actually don't really do that. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be technological.
Yeah.
This is my point, which is, I think it was someone said yesterday, we have to remember the soul of this, and I think that's what it is. You have to combine tech and traditional to get the best out of it.
But that's a fundamental shift in how the model has been so far, because developers develop and they say people have to accept the standard that we set.
Absolutely.
because developers believe that they are actually setting the progressive standards. So there's a fundamental shift in that process actually. Now consumers are saying, in fact they have been saying in many places, that we don't want to buy what you're making. And that's actually reflective in the market. In so many market conditions, there are so many units unsold. I think it's happening in India, it's happening in many countries where units are unsold. And if you were to look at people's aspirations to want to buy property, why are properties unsold? It's not just about price. It's about it not fitting into the specifications what people want today. And that's very reflective of the whole old shift between where developers need to be today about understanding, let's not build things that people don't want to buy.
So to put it into an analogy there,
Yeah.
and there's a famous quote by an ice hockey player called Wayne Gretzky, who said, I don't hit the puck where it is now. My aim is to predict where the puck is going to be, and that always gives me the edge over everybody else. And that's quite interesting.
Yes.
But that's, I think, where we are today with development, which is you're predicting what you think people want.
Right.
So what, in his case, if ice hockey is no longer the game
sport.
anymore, right?
Exactly.
It's all changed. You have to speak to the people that you believe are going to be buying that development to help you predict what you're going to be building.
But today's consumers are also very demanding. They come for possession of the apartment or the flat. They go through a quality check completely. I mean, today companies are employing huge quality control teams to ensure that everything is as per the specification given, everything is checked, tested, made, and then in front of them do the check once again, take the signature so that you know that everything is fine up to their requirement. It is no longer that this is the house, please take it and sign here and push off. No. It's a very educated consumers you have today, and the millennials will be more educated.
So in closing, Nico, I see that there's a lot of forward thinking in the Pollux Properties Group, and you have so many new projects that are coming up. How do you see this applying across all the markets that you are in? Do you see a lot of similarities, because there's Pollux in Singapore, there's Pollux in Indonesia, and Indonesia has got so many other cities which are like mini Singapores, right?
I think again in Pollux Properties, our main philosophy is quality of life, providing quality of life. And in order to provide a real quality of life, I think what James said is very true. We have to have a clear understanding of our customers. And number two, we also have to be updated with the latest prop tech in order to enhance this quality of life. And I think Colonel also have given a lot of insights on how to create a much better quality of life for the seniors, to create a harmonious living within our developments. Yeah. So comes to conclusion is that how well do we do in creating or providing quality of life for the people through our developments?
Very good. So I think we had a great discussion today. We should have this opportunity to touch back every 2 or 3 months and probably exchange views on Skype. Now with that we have technology, we can do a Skype video conference call and have a chat and update ourselves of what developments are taking place in our respective areas. It would be a fantastic way to share even with the audience. I think the markets are also very different. I think James sees the rest of the world a lot more than we do with all your speaker assignments. And Colonel, I think you have been called now to many countries to start getting involved in what they're doing.
I stay away from life.
Yeah, it's good. I think we can also share on how Colonel's insight has affected our developments. James' insight have changed the way we develop our projects, and we give an update so that they can share with the rest of the audience which they meet up with.
That's right. Thank you. So we've had this great chat, and we're going to keep continuing to update you with more very interesting discussions with people who are actually influencing the property sector. And more than that, actually, how they're influencing the way we live and the way we work and the way we coexist among all our citizens of the nation that we are here with. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed the chat. We'll catch you once again very soon.